We're talking about changes in internet privacy. And last night, the House and the Senate passed a joint resolution to repeal the FCC's recent privacy rules, although many of those rules hadn't even gone into effect yet. So I'm not sure if it's really a net change, but it does open the possibility to all sorts of nightmare scenarios when it comes to our browsing history and our privacy and our own personal interest being exposed to third parties. Shawn Tuma is a data protection expert, cybercrime lawyer. Shawn, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
We're great. Thanks for coming on to explain this for us. And please, I went to school in Alabama and Mississippi, so use fifth grade language.
I'm from Louisiana.
Good. We'll both be talking slow then.
Absolutely. Really, what is at issue here is whether our internet service providers are able to aggregate the data, to take the data that we put into our browsers and through our search history and sell that to those in the big data business who want to put together profiles and target advertising towards us. And back in October, as what they called a midnight regulation, the Obama administration passed an FCC broadband rule that said they had to obtain a user's consent before they could do that. And so now those regulations never went into effect, and the House and the Senate have now voted to repeal that basically. It's never gone into effect, but they've now said, no, we're going back to the way things were, but you're going to have to opt out if you don't want to use it. That's what the service providers are saying. So that's really what it's all over.
Now, it seems to me like we're really not sure what the effects of this are going to be if there's no real change to the way our personal data is being used anyway. There are already protections that would be enforced by the FCC. And I, as someone who's an advocate for smaller government at all levels, having fewer regulations, I think, generally speaking, is good. But technology evolves so fast, and the ability to comb the internet for personal information is evolving so quickly that there are some dangers to what we're doing online if we're not protecting ourselves and being careful. It does expose us to being manipulated and used by people who may be using it for nefarious reasons or just trying to make a buck.
Well, that's exactly right. And the thing we have to keep in mind here is, number one, this is exactly what's already being done by the web companies such as Facebook and Google with your information. So the notion that this is going to all of a sudden make you private or more private is really not as big of a impact as it we want to make it out to be. This is politics. But at the end of the day, the workaround to this is education. We have to educate ourselves on what these issues are and how they impact us. Because even if this bill passed, had not been repealed and these regulations went into effect, all these companies would do would be put a little tiny button on there with a link to a long agreement that said you give them the right to do all this, and they'd say, click here if you agree, and every single person would click there, agree to it, and there wouldn't be any difference whatsoever.
Shawn, are you telling me that nobody reads their terms of service agreements?
That's what I'm telling you.
Wow. I am shocked. I take a long time every night with every app that I download to read the terms of service. I will set aside an entire afternoon. I'll take a day off from work to read the Apple terms of service every time there's an iOS update.
And you would have to.
Right.
But that's the problem is we as a people, look, if we want privacy in the way that we're talking about with the ISPs, then we should also want it with the companies like Google and Facebook. We should want it with everyone, because if the objective is to protect our information, it's to protect it regardless of who's disclosing it.
Yeah, here's the thing. This is really, I don't know that it's that big a deal. There is the potential for some pretty nightmare scenarios, as I was describing earlier, but at first, I don't know that it's a big deal, because right now, if you're online, if you Google a new pair of shoes, then every time you go on Facebook or every other website that you visit for the next 3 weeks, all they're going to be pushing out to you are web tile ads about shoes. So they're already tracking our browsing habits on the internet. And this is just an additional way for companies to make money, which I would hope would result in lower user fees for the consumer, for me, as opposed to taking that access to advertising money away and then having the internet service providers, the ISP, raising their user prices.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, my children figured that out a few Christmases ago when they would surf the internet and see that all the things they wanted for Christmas were now popping up on the targeted ads. They knew we had gotten them that for Christmas.
Perfect. That's why you should always browse incognito in Chrome.
Well, you raise a good point, because browsing incognito and browsing with private on the iOS devices does keep it from going into your browser history, but that does not mean that both your ISPs as well as the companies who are performing the searches, the browser services themselves, are not collecting that information, because they are. It just means it's not on your device.
So what's going to happen looking down the road 3 years from now, near the end of the first Trump administration, the first Trump presidency? Will this be a bigger issue than it is in March of 2017?
It probably will be, and it should be, because at some point the American people have to wake up and say, how do we want our privacy treated? How do we want our cybersecurity treated? And pick one side or the other on that issue. And with our integral interaction with the EU and the way the EU treats it, which is very stringent, and they do not allow anybody to do this kind of stuff without providing informed consent, which means you have to be able to see it and know it and waive it, then we're going to have a situation where we're clashing with them so much that these issues are going to be brought up into the forefront, because transnational companies do business back and forth, and we're going to need consistent rules.
Is it something that needs to be legislated through Congress, or can it just be handled through the FCC, so we don't have a myriad of rules and regulations coming from different departments, from different branches of government that everybody has to adhere to, that adds to the cost of doing business?
Well, my personal view is we need a comprehensive congressional solution to not only this, but to all of cybersecurity and privacy issues as a whole, going back to state breach notification laws and hacking laws and things like that. But this is one that will probably be addressed first through the FCC, but it has to be done in cooperation with Congress, because what Congress did with this vote is it refused them the right to bring it back based on these issues. They basically said, this is now out of your jurisdiction until we tell you otherwise.
Shawn, where's the best place consumers can go to learn more about this in the least biased manner possible? Because it can be a pretty complicated issue. I'm looking at a poll that our morning guy, Fred Lefebvre, did this morning. Is the repeal of internet privacy rules a win for you? And it's overwhelmingly, as of right now, no, it's not a win, by like 3-1 in votes.
Yeah, this is a very political issue, and people are making it out on both sides to sound much more dramatic than it really is.
It's the end of the world for a lot of people.
Exactly. And that clicking that little button makes all that difference in the world. You either click in or click out. They set it up either way, so you're going to click it if they want you to. But really, the best place to educate yourself on all privacy issues like this is through the FTC website, ftc.gov, because the FTC has taken a comprehensive approach at looking at our privacy issues as they interact in many different ways, and they have a lot of material out there and do a pretty good job. I mean, they're a regulatory agency, so they're going to be fairly pro-regulation in a lot of ways, but they at least highlight the issues for people in a way that they can make their own decision.
Shawn, I appreciate your time. Shawn Tuma, data protection expert and a lawyer at Scheef and Stone in Dallas. Thanks so much for your time, Shawn.
My pleasure. Thank you.